Getting a CAPTCHA solved on your local machine is just, well, it's easy. You write a little script, submit a task, get your token back, and boom, you're done. But keeping that FastAPI and HTMX application running reliably in actual production, that is the real challenge. Welcome to this explainer. If your automation is running in background workers, scheduled jobs, or production APIs, a working demo simply isn't enough. We're going to need a robust system.
In your test environment, everything is perfectly calm. You bypass the protected request in 5 minutes, high-five yourself, and call it a day. But in the chaotic reality of production environments, oh man, simple scripts go there to die. We are talking about unpredictable network interruptions, background workers running completely unattended, and nasty retry storms that just eat up all your resources. We really need to bridge this gap between that deceptively simple local demo and a true production-grade integration.
So here's the agenda for today's explainer. First, the production reality. Second, the practical checklist. Third, measuring workflow success. And fourth, common mistakes and FAQs. Let's jump right in.
All right, part 1, the production reality.
Listen, we have to acknowledge right out of the gate that the code that works flawlessly while you watch it run on your screen is probably going to fail when it runs unattended. Why is that? Well, because of some very specific production antagonists. You've got network hiccups that interrupt your API calls, you have background workers completely lacking any browser context, you run into session mismatches, endless retry storms, and of course, constantly evolving CAPTCHA implementations. A rigid, hard-coded script literally cannot survive this. You absolutely need resilient architecture.
So let's get into how we actually fix this with part 2, the practical checklist.
Think of this as your actionable playbook, the exact steps you need to take before you even think about merging that pull request. Step 1, and this is absolutely crucial, capture exactly what the solver needs. You want to inspect the live page and collect only the correct site key, the page URL, the CAPTCHA type, action values, and any required proxy settings. Honestly, storing anything more than this just creates a bunch of false debugging trails later on. In fact, incorrect inputs are literally a leading cause of integration failure before the solver even attempts a bypass.
Okay, moving on. Next up, you've got to standardize your workflow. Every single request, no exceptions, must follow this sequence. First, capture the parameters. Then, submit the task. Next, wait before polling. Then you retrieve the result, apply the token, verify the protected request, and finally, record the outcome. By forcing every single request through this exact sequence, maintenance suddenly becomes manageable. Basically, a consistent workflow is a predictable workflow.
Now, this brings us to what is easily the absolute most critical pitfall developers face: session mismatch. What is this? Well, it happens when a token is successfully solved by your automation, but the target server just rejects it anyway. And the reason? Because the token was submitted from a totally different browser session or HTTP client than the original challenge. You must keep the handoff completely seamless. We're talking about using the exact same cookie jar and browser context throughout the entire process.
All right, let's talk numbers. 120. That is your absolute hard maximum timeout in seconds per task. Polling responsibly is so important here. I mean, polling too frequently doesn't magically make the CAPTCHA solve faster, it literally just adds server-loaded noise. The best practice here is to wait a bit before your first poll, check at regular intervals to find that hard maximum timeout of 120 seconds, and hey, if a terminal error comes back before that time is up, stop immediately.
And when things fail, because, let's be real, they absolutely will, how do we handle retries? The magic number here is 3. You really need to control your retries by capping them at 3 attempts. And you want to use those limited attempts with exponential backoff. Remember, retries exist strictly to recover from temporary failures, like a random network blip. They should never ever be used to hide permanent configuration problems. So use that limited retry budget and make sure you log every final failure so you can actually investigate those recurring issues.
Which brings us to part 3, measuring workflow success.
You know the old saying, if you can't measure it, you can't defend it. But here's the thing, we have to distinguish between a successful solver and a successful workflow. You'll want to wire these crucial KPIs into your FastAPI dashboard. We're looking at a first solve latency ideally under 25 seconds and a solver success rate of at least 95%. But listen, the real truth, that lies in end-to-end acceptance and the cost per accepted solve. Think about it. If your solver success is 99%, but your end-to-end acceptance is only 50%, you likely have a session mismatch problem on your hands. And that cost per solve is quietly just eroding your margins. So track first solve latency, retry rate, workflow completion, downstream token acceptance, and cost. These are the metrics that actually tell you if your entire workflow is healthy.
Another thing to keep in mind, CAPTCHA implementations evolve a lot. The protection on a page today might be completely different next month. But building a modular workflow via a single API lets you swap out the task type and adapt to new CAPTCHA families without having to rebuild your entire integration from scratch. It's great. You just keep the exact same submit and poll loop, and you just ship the update. Easy.
All right, on to our final section, Part 4, Common Mistakes and FAQs. Let's run through some rapid-fire traps that developers fall into all the time. First, using incorrect request parameters. Next, session mismatches, where tokens get submitted from a totally different session. Overpulling and causing unnecessary noise. Setting up infinite loop retries that just burn through your API balance. Ignoring your terminal logs. And finally, measuring only solver success instead of complete workflow success. Honestly, just avoiding these specific mistakes can significantly improve your production stability pretty much overnight. Now for 3 quick questions we hear from developers constantly. Question 1. Why does my token get rejected even though it was totally solved? We see this all the time. And the answer? It is almost always a session mismatch. The token is perfectly valid, but because it was submitted from a different browser session than the one that originally generated the challenge, the target server just throws it out. So again, keep everything in one session.
Question 2. How should I actually handle retries? Listen, whatever you do not retry indefinitely. Limit your retry attempts, use exponential backoff, and take the time to investigate repeated failures instead of just retrying endlessly to brute force a misconfiguration.
Question 3. What should I monitor? Please do not just monitor successful solves. You really need to focus on end-to-end workflow success. Monitor your downstream token acceptance, your latency, and your retry rates. Because that gap between a successful solve and actual downstream acceptance, that is exactly where your most critical bugs are going to hide.
Okay, one really important operational reminder before we wrap up here. This type of automated workflow should absolutely only be used in owned, client-authorized, or contractually permitted environments. Basically, if you own the application, or you operate it for an authorized client, or you have a legitimate data collection agreement, then this structure is perfect for you. But it is definitely not a recipe for circumventing protections on third-party sites where you have absolutely no agreement. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Are you building a predictable, observable, and maintainable automation workflow? Because reliable CAPTCHA automation isn't just about getting one successful local solve. It is really about engineering a robust system that scales seamlessly right alongside your FastAPI and HTMX applications. Think about it. What part of your workflow needs the most attention today? If you found this checklist helpful, be sure to explore the complete FastAPI and HTMX integration guide for actual implementation examples, operational recommendations, and production best practices. Follow for more practical engineering checklists covering backend automation, CAPTCHA workflows, and production reliability. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and hey, happy building!